friends, it's Michelle from Little Farm in the Valley. So today I want to talk to you about bacon, making your own homemade bacon. It is actually not as hard as you think. I always say if I can do it, anyone can do it. So today I will show you the process of preparing, curing, and smoking your own bacon. So the most important thing obviously in making bacon is the meat. If it's pork bacon that you're going to be making, which this video is about pork bacon, so these are pork bellies. That's normally what bacon is made out of. And we're going to look these over. And if you don't have a way to get pork bellies, you could probably go to your local butcher shop and ask if they would sell some, or if they know anyone that would sell you some. Usually it's not impossible to find pork bellies. So first of all, you want to make sure there's no skin left. I don't think there's any skin. As you can see, it's very fatty. So if it's super fatty, you can trim off some of the fat, which I think I'll trim off some of the thick pieces, and maybe I'll make lard out of it. It depends how much I get, I guess. So I have 2 bellies. I'll just trim a little bit of that fat off. You don't want to trim all the fat off, because obviously what is bacon without the fat, right? There's just some pieces where it's extra thick, and this is beautiful pork fat. This should make some beautiful lard that you can use for baking. So it's all good stuff that you don't need to toss. Even if you don't want too much fat on your bacon, you can definitely still do stuff with it. It's a little bit hard to tell, but there's actually some meat here, so I don't want to cut too deep. There's a pretty big chunk up here. So I'll just be doing a basic bacon recipe. Nothing too fancy, just a really delicious basic bacon. I think this one's okay. Check the other one. It's been pretty nicely trimmed already, so there's not much left for me to take off, because as you can see, there's actually a little bit of meat in here, which makes the lard making a little bit more complicated when it's not pure fat. So I'm only hurting my lard making with taking too much meat along. So that's about all I'm gonna do for trimming the fat. So you need to weigh your pork bellies and find out what you have for pounds. One of mine is 5 pounds and the other one is 6 pounds. So my recipe was for 4 pounds. So I'm going to double that. I'm going to start with a cup of salt. You can use regular salt, kosher salt, pink salt, whatever fancy salt you have is probably fine. And we're going to do 2 cups of brown sugar. Hopefully I have 2 cups here. And then we are going to do about a tablespoon of pink salt. This is Redmond real salt, what I'm going to use. And then some fresh black peppercorn. I'm just going to grind a little bit of that up. I might add more if I think I need more. So we're going to combine the cured ingredients. Just work it together with your hands. It smells amazing already. And then we're just going to work it onto the meat. I'm going to add a little bit more pepper. Basically going to slather our pork bellies with this cure. Really rub it in well. And if I find I need some more, I guess I'll make a little bit more, but I think it should be fine. My recipe that's for a 4-pound belly says to put it in a gallon-sized Ziploc bag to cure it in the refrigerator, but since my bellies are quite a bit bigger, I think I'll just leave them in this bowl. We'll get the other one in here. I've never actually done this much at a time. I think my last one was maybe half this size. So my last one was probably a 4-pound one, but it turned out really great. Some of the best bacon I've ever had, which most things that you make yourself and put the work into it, it's a little bit more memorable than something you just buy that someone else made. It's quite a sense of accomplishment knowing how to do certain things. I think we have enough. It's got a good layer on both sides of both of the bellies. So this is what's going to cure your meat. And obviously there's a million different ingredients or recipes that you could use, but this is just the basic bacon that I'm going with. So our next ingredient is thyme. We're gonna let these pork bellies cure. I'm probably gonna wrap this in saran wrap and leave it in the refrigerator for 7 to 10 days. Kind of however your schedule allows. Make sure it's 7 at least. And then every day I'm gonna open it up and take a look at it and maybe turn the meat and just keep working that cure in. So if you want to make bacon to be ready at a certain time, you better start on time, because it's not a 1 or 2 day process. But all good things take time. So next I'm going to wrap it and get it put in the refrigerator. So with this little bit of fat that I have, I think I'm actually going to try and make lard. I know this seems like a very silly amount to make lard with, but we actually have some pigs that we're going to butcher eventually. So eventually I'll have like a lot of lard to make. So I think I would rather learn, using a very small batch than messing up 10 or 15, 20 pounds of it. So just for a learning experience, I'm going to make lard out of this fat. So I'm going to start by cutting it into 1 or 2 inch pieces. There's a crock pot method, there's a Dutch oven method, but I didn't want to pull out my crock pot or my Dutch oven for this little bit. So we're just going to use a thick bottomed pot and cut it in. And this can also take some time. It could take maybe all day, we'll see. Again, I don't really know because I've never done it, but it sounds very simple. So we have it all cut up. So we're just gonna set this on the stove with the lid on, and I'm gonna put it on 2 because it says to do it on low, and apparently it can take 1 to 3 hours, and occasionally you have to stir it so it's not sticking to the bottom. So we'll see how this experiment goes. So we're about a half hour into this, and there's already some brown pieces. So it definitely needs to be stirred. I've learned that by now. And it is starting to melt down. So we're about an hour in at this point. You can see the pieces are getting smaller as it is melting down. So it seems like things have slowed down quite a bit. We just have these couple little bits floating around, and you know, I'm not sure if that's the meat, which would be like the cracklings that was in the leftover in the fat. I will give it some more time and see. If they get smaller, that'll tell me it was fat, and if they stay the same, that probably means that those are the cracklings or the meat that was still left in the fat. So I've let this go for maybe an hour, and I don't know if it's my imagination, but I think these pieces are getting smaller. These pieces that I thought were meat, but I don't think there was that much meat in the fat. So just gonna let it go. Maybe the recipe wasn't exaggerating when it said it can take hours and hours. So I'm just gonna let this go and see what happens. So it's been a few more hours and this really hasn't changed much. So I'm gonna go ahead and assume that that is the meat and the fat is all melted down. So I think we can go ahead and strain this. So here's my setup for straining it. Hopefully it works. I'm gonna see if I can do this well enough that it goes right in there. So once this cools, it should turn a clear white, and you can freeze it or keep it in your fridge, or it should actually be shelf stable for a couple months. So as that cools down, I will show you what it looks like. And if it's pure white or very, very white, the whiter it is, the purer and the better it rendered down, apparently. So we'll see if we did a good job. So it's the next day, and here is my lard. It is not pure white, it's kind of an off-white, but still I'm really happy with how it turned out. It solidified nicely, and now I can either keep it in the refrigerator or just on a shelf, and it should be fine for months. So that experiment turned out well. Anyway, moving on to our bacon. So on the second day, I'm going to take a look at it. You can see there's some liquid that's pooled on the bottom here. So what we're going to do is just continue to work the cure into the bacon. I'm going to try and do kind of one at a time. A little hard to do with two of them, but just keep working that liquid into it. You want to do this every day. Dip it into that liquid on the bottom and just keep working it in there. It's looking pretty good. And then we're going to cover it and just pop it back in the refrigerator. And I'm going to try to remember to do this, to keep working it every day for the remainder of the time that I have it in the refrigerator. Just turning it a couple times. So we're about 6 days into our bacon project. So every day we've been taking this out and flipping it and just making sure we keep rubbing this cure in. So at this point, we will actually wash the cure off of the meat. At this point, your meat is supposed to be firm, but still pliable, which it kind of is. You can see it is firm, but I can still kind of work it. Let's douse that bottom one more time. So So I think I'm going to leave it until tonight in the refrigerator, and then tonight we will take it and rinse off the cure, and then we'll be ready for the next step in this bacon process. So here is our bacon the next morning. Now the next step in this bacon is to rinse off the cure. You can see it is firm but still pliable. So today we're going to rinse off the cure and get the meat out on racks to dry. So the reason you want to wash off your cure on your bacon is simply because it's just a lot of salt. I mean, you don't want to do too much of a wash, just give it a good rinse, and some of that salt will come out. The research that I did basically said if you don't rinse it, you stand a little bit of a chance of your bacon being salty to the point where it's not really good anymore. So that's about all I'm going to do, just give it a quick rinse. I have done this and skipped this step and it was fine, so I'm trying to be cautious not to rinse too much because I don't think it's a big issue for my recipe anyway. So here's my makeshift drying rack. I have a couple containers on the bottom, a towel to catch the liquid, and just a rack for my oven. So I'm going to lay the meat on here to dry. So the recipe says to allow the meat to form a pellicle by drying either in the refrigerator overnight uncovered or on a rack with a fan. I do not have the refrigerator space to do it in the refrigerator, so I'm going with the fan method. So I'm going to let this fan blow on this meat overnight, and then tomorrow when it's completely dry, I'll probably flip the meat a couple times throughout the day, and then tomorrow we will see if it's ready to smoke. So I had the fan on the meat all night, and I know it's hard to see on the video, but it has kind of a dry, crusty feel to it, the meat. So now it's finally ready to go on the smoker. So our smoker is just a Pit Boss. So I have it on the very lowest setting, the setting that just says smoke. The bacon recipe actually says to cold smoke it, but this is the only smoker we have and this is what we've been using. So I just put it to the lowest possible setting. I'm gonna leave some room for the next one, and this is how we're gonna smoke the bacon. So we're gonna smoke this for 4 hours, and I will come out to check periodically to make sure I've got pellets still in the hopper and to make sure everything's doing what it should, and I'll probably flip it maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of the next 4 hours. So our smoker temperature right now is at 110. If you do the research, you'll actually find that it's kind of all across the board as far as the temperature that people like to smoke it. Some people will even smoke it at like 350, but I find for the most part, most people like to smoke it as low as they possibly can, which is what I like to do. So I just set it to the lowest setting. We're about an hour and a half in right now, so I'm turning it for the first time. But I guess the temperature that you like to smoke it depends completely on your preference. For me, I set my smoker as low as I can. It's fluctuating between 110 and 120 right now. So right now there's an hour and a half left on our timer. We'll flip it again. You can see it's changing color from kind of that white into a more yellow. Temperature now is at 125. Okay, we've reached the end of our smoking time, so we're going to be taking this off. Looks pretty good. It's very fatty, this bacon. Let's see what this one looks like. So my bacon is cooling on this parchment paper. At this point, you can either wrap it really well and store it in the refrigerator for a couple weeks, or you can freeze it and it'll be good for 4 or 5 months usually, but it's bacon, right? It's not gonna last that long. But for the sake of this video, I'm gonna chill one of the pieces down and I'll slice some off and fry it up in a pan so you can see what that looks like. And then the rest of it's gonna go in the freezer. Oh yeah, this is good. Crunchy, flavorful. Even though we rinsed it, it still got just enough salt. The hint of sweetness is really, really good in this recipe. Really good bacon. Goodbye store-bought bacon. This is where it's at. So good. And not really that difficult. Get yourself some pork bellies and make yourself some bacon. Anyway guys, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a video. We will talk to you soon.